sitting above 15-foot deep shafts that we drilled and blasted off that. Each one of those shafts is full of inch rods and 3/4 inch rods, vertical and horizontal. The verticals were inch and the horizontals were 3/4. Each one of these shells, when then the iron was set, we poured, each one of them took 15 to 20 yards of concrete. Each one of these 4 corners where the base sits. The plates were put on top of welded on top of the rails, and the anchor bolts were set in place, and then these were poured. And this is the first picture. They were already been poured, and they're ready for the iron. Okay. These were in one piece. These were fabricated down in this section of the base was fabricated down in Roberts's yard.
Which piece? Which was fabricated?
These.
Okay.
Okay, these here. Okay. We hauled these up to the top of the mountain on a trailer, lowboy. In those days, before the new road that we built, everything had to be unloaded at the top and hooked on a dozer and carried in, come along to the back of the ripping hook, the ripper on the back of the dozer. We rigged it with 2 come-alongs to hold those bases, and we carried them. It took us 4 hours to come. Eddie, Stephan, and myself walked, he's another iron worker. We walked behind these pieces went down the mountain, over the down 10 switchbacks, across the valley for a half a mile, and up 13 switchbacks to get the side of the lady. It took us all day long, 4 hours in, 4 hours out, to get those bases in there. When they were in place, the grove, which we had a grove there, a crane, they were set on top of the existing columns that came up out of those 4 shafts. When that was all ready, then the forms were already put together down in Roberts's yard. All these rods were fabricated at the old Butte Mines boiler shop. The MRI allowed us to go in there and fabricate these rods. Myself, Royce Goog, and Joe Lake, and Reno Isaacson. We fabricated all these rebar, bended. Each one had to be marked of each where it went. They went through the iron, as you notice. It goes right through the iron and everything else. It's all tied in all around. We took them down to Joe Roberts' yard down there, down on South Montana Street. Earl Casagrande and Bill Bart and all them carpenters had already had all the forms put up, and they were all built down there, and they had all the forms put up. And then we installed the rods inside in exactly the same way they went on top of the mountain, and we match marked them. So we know exactly what this ring on the bottom, and this ring on the top, this is the bottom ring here at the top ring. That these would go right where they're supposed to go. Then they were hauled to the mountain. The forms were all taken apart and they were hauled to the mountain. On top of that mountain, there's no such a thing as an ironworker or a carpenter or an electrician or boilermakers. Everybody was the Lady of the Rockies crew. I helped drive nails in these. The guys helped me with the rebar. It helped us put rebar in. Everybody helped everybody. It was all for the lady. Did you notice this here? All the rods were brought up there, and they were set around the statue in different stacks so that they would correspond for where they went in at. Now when it come time to put them in, they were muscled in by hand. Each one of them rods is 40 foot long. They're 3/4 inch rebar, 40 foot long, and they're bent at the shape, the contour of the form. I'd take 2 or 3 guys to muck them in, and 2 guys in there, Jimmy Keto and myself, tying rebar, and then at different times Stephan was in there tying rebar. But these guys here helped muck them in. You had to pick them up. A 40 foot stick of 3/4 inch rebar weighs 80 pounds. So you know what. We got them all in, got it all ready. Now well, these are called chairs. These are railroad rails. The reason we went from, usually your chair consists of a 1/2 inch rod standing up and tied in along all the outside here. When we knew the tremendous weight was going to be, we decided that we had a bunch of railroad rails out at the top of the mountain. We brought them in and cut them to length and had them welded. As you can see, they're sitting all along here. We had them welded all along so they held up the top mat. Rebar went across the top of them, 3/4 inch rebar went across the top, and then all these rods were set down on top of them. And the only thing that was welded in that whole thing was these chairs, as we call them, that hold up the second deck. The first mat was 6 inches off the ground. The top mat is 6 inches off the top of the forms, as you can see. Okay, come time to pour, we had our own batch plant up there. We had our own cement, we had West Pioneer Fuels dump trucks. Everything was empty, everything was batched, was brought up in dump trucks by Laszlo from Anaconda. Him and his son brought it all up. The first day they came up, the switchbacks, they had 4 yards of gravel and one had 4 yards of sand. They got to the top and they unloaded and the father said to the son, "What do you think?" He said, "Oh yeah, easy." So the next time they came up with 8 yards of gravel and 8 yards. They come up one switchback, back up the next one. All the way up the mountain. They brought all that up. Then Three Forks Portland Cement out of Trident donated the cement. But the bulk plant broke down. So then Laszlo and his son came with the dump trucks all the way. The cement was brought into Butte and dumped off at the Butte Pioneer Concrete Force. But it was in sacks. 98 pounds to the sack. 1,200 sacks of cement we had on top of that mountain. They came up there with the dump trucks. We had a designated area in one of the pictures it shows to unload the sacks of cement. I always told my wife I went to work about 6'1", I come home 5'4", I think, after them guy dropping them. That kid played fullback, then Lazarus played fullback for the Bobcats. He'd pick up them, drop them right on your shoulder. Here we are at, this is the day it was. Look at the weather. Fogged in, snowing on top of that mountain. Guy O'Sullivan and his wife Madeline come up to see how things were going that day, and she said to me, "John," she said, "you know, it's hard to believe. You guys are up here, it's cold, the wind is blowing, it's snowing, and you're wrestling 98-pound sacks of cement." And she says, "Everybody got a smile on their face. You're working for the lady." Pete Talon came up in California to help put this up with this. He's a tremendous cook. Man, what a cook he was. He made hot chili that day. I'll tell you, we weren't very cold after we put that chili away. Was it hot? And this is, you know, it's hard to believe. There were 76 men on the mountain that day. The original crew that was up there from the start, putting it all up together, they would not let us work. We just had to sit down and walk around. I took the names of 76 men down. Made a copy for the Lady of the Rockies and made a copy for Joe Roberts down at his place down there. But 76 men. It was hard to believe. You would not believe the food that was sent up to us. We had enough 3-pound cans of coffee to work for another year up on top of that mountain without buying a can of coffee. We had big pasties, we had little pasties. We had roast beef sandwiches, we had turkey sandwiches, we had pop, we had beer. But just everything was donated by the people of Butte. As a matter of fact, the morning before we went up to start this pour, they had breakfast for us at 5 o'clock in the morning down at Joe Roberts. As the ladies came out and cooked breakfast for us down there in his office. We had breakfast going before we went up. We went up on the mountain at 5:30 that morning to start all this operation. And this is in December now, or September, but it was still. And as God is my judge, you can ask anybody that was on the mountain that day. During that pour, the worst thing you can have is a rainstorm. During that pour, we counted 7 rainstorms come over around Butte, and they all went around the Lady of the Rockies. We never got a drop of rain. But this Just like I said, this was snow this day.
Now, what were the dates of this project, that first date up there where you got the iron in the ground?
August the 21st, 1985.
And then you got the finished plate for that foundation somewhere?
Here's the finished. There she is sitting on top of it.
No, got a glare on that side.
December the 20th, 1985, her head went on. And that's the day the lights went on. That was payday.
So this all happened in one 3-month period?
But we were up there all summer though, digging those holes. Oh, I'll tell you, that was, them shafts were something else, solid rock. Scratching and rooting and drive a bar down and put a quarter stick of powder in and pop the holes and get some more. There's what it looks like. There's the finished product with the base sitting on top of it.
Just before they started putting the Lady of the Rockies up.
196 yards of concrete in that base. September 17th, 1985.
And Leroy Lee made this on the job?
Mm-hmm. Cut it out of a piece of iron.
The cement stacked up at the batch plant. Their tanks, they scrounged all over town for the batch plant. They gravity fed water to the plant. Bob,
This all started back before we ever got laid off. Well, before they shut the mountain down. Bill come by and he said, John, he said, when we get the Lady of the Rockies ready to go on the mountain, would you tie the rebar? And I said, sure. I didn't know what the Lady of the Rockies was from straight up, but it was something that he wanted done. Bob's wife was there, diagnosed with cancer. You know, back about 1978. So he made a pledge to the Blessed Mother, if his wife would be healed, he would put a statue in his yard of her and pray to her. Well, the word got out to the guys he worked with. He was an electrician foreman in the pit, electrical foreman. The word got out to the rest of the guys, and Joe Roberts got involved in it, and they formed a Lady of the Rockies organization, and Dennis John Nettles' mother was the treasurer, and Bob O'Bill and Al Beavis and Mike Cerise and Joe McCarthy, who died. He was a superintendent of construction. He died. Walter Duffy, he died. But they were all in on it. And they started this project, and the land belonged to Ocello, where this statue stands, which belonged to the Ocellos. So when they heard about it, young guy Ocello's father donated the land to the Lady of the Rockies where she sits, where the site sits. But to get to the Lady of the Rockies, there was a road there that went to the top of the hill to maintain all the towers, the TV towers and the radio towers that sits on top of the East Ridge. But that's where it ended. But then this crew went up there, and they had a dozer that Anaconda Company lent them that was in tough shape, or Arco lent them, and they started driving. Well, they drove through the first mountain, and then they came where they had to go. They went down to the bottom of the valley, which was 11 switchbacks to the bottom, across the valley for 1.5 miles, and then where the site was, they had to go up 13 switchbacks to get back up there, across the meadow like or valley like there, and then start blasting all this out. As you can see, the shear plates of how this cliffs were sheared off, blasted down to the level. The Lady of the Rockies